State of the economy getting back into the fast lane. The global economy exhibited a steady and yet uneven growth across regions in 2024. A notable trend was the slowdown in global manufacturing, especially in Europe and parts of Asia, due to supply chain disruptions and weak external demand. In contrast, the services performed better, supporting growth in many economies. Inflationary pressures eased in most economies. However, the services inflation has remained persistent. Although commodity prices have stabilized, the risk of synchronized price increases persist, with growth varying across economies and last mile disinflation proving sticky. Central banks may chart varying paths of monetary easing. This will lead to uncertainty over future policy rates and inflation trajectories. This apart, geopolitical tensions, ongoing conflicts, and trade policy risk continue to pose challenges to global economic stability. In this global context, India displayed steady economic growth. As per the first advanced estimates of the national accounts, India's real GDP is estimated to grow by as per the first advanced estimates of the national accounts, India's real GDP is estimated to grow by 6.4% in FY25. Growth in the first half of FY25 was supported by agriculture and services, with rural demand improving on the back of record kharif production and favorable agricultural conditions. Manufacturing sector faced pressures due to weak global demand and domestic seasonal conditions. Private consumption remained stable, reflecting steady domestic demand. Fiscal discipline and strong external balance supported by a services trade surplus and healthy remittance growth contributed to macroeconomic stability. Together, these factors provided a solid foundation for sustained growth amid external uncertainties. Looking ahead, India's economic prospects for FY26 are balanced. Headwinds to growth include elevated geopolitical and trade uncertainties and possible commodity price shocks. Domestically, the translation of order books of private capital goods sector into sustained investment pickup, improvements in consumer confidence, and corporate wages pickup will be key to promoting growth. Rural demand backed by rebound in agricultural production and anticipated easing of food inflation and a stable macroeconomic environment provide an upside to near-term growth. Overall, India will need to improve its global competitiveness through grassroots level structural reforms and deregulation to reinforce medium-term growth potential. India's economic prospects are balanced. Headwinds to growth include elevated geopolitical and trade uncertainty and possible commodity price shocks. Domestically, translation of order books of private capital goods sector into sustained investment pickup, improvements in consumer confidence and corporate wages pickup will be key to promoting growth. Rural demand backed by rebound in agricultural production and anticipated easing of food inflation and a stable macroeconomic environment providing an upside to the near-term growth. Overall, India will need to improve its global competitiveness through grassroots level structural reforms. We need to improve our global competitiveness through grassroots level structural reforms. We need to improve our global competitiveness through grassroots structure global reforms. Outlook: a steady growth trajectory shapes the global economic outlook for 2024 through regional patterns vary. The near term global outlook is expected to be shade lower than the trend level. The services sector continues to drive global expansion with notable resilience in India. Meanwhile, manufacturing is struggling in Europe, whereas structural weaknesses persist. Trade outlook remains clouded in the next year. Inflationary pressures have been easing globally, though risk of synchronized price pressures linger due to potential geopolitical disruptions, such as tensions in the Middle East and the ongoing Russia Ukraine conflict. Central banks have adopted more accommodative monetary policies. However, the pace of rate cuts varies across regions depending on growth imperatives and the pace of disinflation, creating potential divergences in economic recovery. On the domestic front, rebounding rural wages augurs well for consumption. Investment activity is expected to pick up, supported by higher public capex and improving business expectations. Capacity utilization in manufacturing remains above the long-term average. Private sector order books have shown steady growth alongside a rise in investment intentions. However, these gains could be tempered by global excess capacities in sectors such as steel, leading to aggressive trade policies in search of demand. Going forward, food inflation is likely to soften in quarter 4 FY25 with seasonal easing of vegetable prices and kharif harvest arrivals. Good rabi production is likely to contain food prices in the first half of FY26. Adverse weather events and rise in international agricultural commodity prices, however, pose risk to food inflation. Global energy and commodity prices have softened in the recent past, making the core inflation outlook benign. However, risks remain on account of significant global political and economic uncertainties. In brief, there are many upsides to the domestic investment, output growth, and disinflation in FY26. They are equally strong, prominent extraneous downsides too. Nonetheless, the fundamentals of the domestic economy remain robust, with strong external account, calibrated fiscal consolidation, and a stable private consumption. Strong external account, calibrated fiscal consolidation, and stable private consumption. On balance of these considerations, we expect the growth in FY26 would be between 6.3 and 6.8%. Navigating global headwinds will require strategic and prudent policy management and reinforcing the domestic fundamentals. Budget 24-25 laid out a multi sectoral policy agenda for sustained growth push. In this context, Chapter 5 elaborates on the need for deregulation and reforms at the grassroots levels to improve the overall competitiveness of the economy, to lift trend growth rates, supporting higher levels of economic activity. Monetary and financial sector developments, cart and the horse. India's monetary and financial sectors have performed well in the first 9 months of FY25. Bank credit has grown at a steady rate in the current financial year, with credit growth converging towards deposit growth. There have been a consistent improvement in the profitability of scheduled commercial banks, as reflected in a fall in gross non-performing assets, accompanied by a rise in a capital to risk-weighted asset ratio (CRAR). The government also achieved significant progress in financial inclusion, with financial inclusion index of the RBI increasing from 53.9 in March 21 to 64.2 at the end of March 24. The government also achieved significant progress in financial inclusion, with financial inclusion index of RBI increasing from 53.9 in March 21 to 64.2 at the end of March 24. Rural financial institutions have been an important player in facilitating India's financial inclusion journey. Development financial institutions have contributed significantly to economic progress by financing infrastructural development projects. Capital markets have demonstrated strong performance, driving capital formation in the real economy, increasing the financialization of domestic savings, and supporting wealth creation. As of December 24, the Indian stock market has recorded new highs, consistently outperforming its emerging market peers despite geopolitical uncertainties and election driven market volatility challenges. Meanwhile, the insurance and pension sectors continue to perform with the vision of achieving universal coverage and strengthening the financial ecosystem further. Financial sector is currently undergoing a transformative period marked by several emerging trends. Notably, there is an increase in the share of consumer credit in overall credit extended by banks and rise in non-banking financing options. Additionally, equity-based financing has gained with popularity, with the number of IPOs increasing six-fold between FY13 and FY24. While these developments herald a new era for the financial sector, they also introduce potential risks from a regulatory standpoint. The rise in consumer debt, expansion of unsecured lending, and growing number of young investors underscore the need for balancing growth and stability. Such regulation should encourage financial sector growth while ensuring stability and resilience. India's financial sector has performed well amidst unfavorable geopolitical conditions. On the monetary front, system liquidity represented by the net position under liquidity adjustment facility remained in surplus during October-November 24. Financial parameters of banks continue to be strong, reflected in improved profitability indicators. Gap between growth of credit and deposits of scheduled commercial banks has narrowed, with deposits keeping pace with loan growth. Capital markets significantly contribute to capital formation, financialization of domestic savings, and wealth creation. Strong macroeconomic fundamentals, healthy corporate earnings, supportive institutional investment, robust inflows from SIPs, and increased formalization, digitization, and accessibility have all fueled the market's continued growth. India's insurance sector is performing well and is projected to become the fastest growing market among G20 nations over the next 5 years. The pension sector is expected to grow as the economy transitions from lower middle income to an upper middle income country. Financial sector is witnessing a moment of positive flux with several changes taking place. Firstly, there is a rise in the share of consumer credit in the overall credit extended by banks. Between FY14 and FY24, share of consumer credit in total bank credit increased from 18.3% to 32.4%. Secondly, between FY14 and FY24, share of consumer credit in total bank credit increased from 18.3% to 32.4%. Secondly, there has been a rise in non-banking finance based financing, non-bank based financing in the recent year. Bank share in total credit has declined from 77% to 58%. Simultaneously, there has been a rise in NBFCs and bond market financing. Thirdly, equity-based financing has catapulted to popularity, with IPO listings growing six times between FY13 and FY24, and India being ranked first globally in terms of number of IPO listings in the in FY24. Young investors are also driving the equity boom under the age of 30, as a report by NSE notes that between March 2018 to September 24, the proportion of young investors surged from 23% to 40%. These emerging trends mark the dawn of a new era for the financial invest sector. However, they also bring regulatory challenges and potential risks that cannot be overlooked. One critical risk to guard against is the dominance of financial markets in shaping policy and macroeconomic outcomes, a phenomenon known as financialization. The consequences of financialization are evident in advanced economies, where it has led to unprecedented levels of public and private sector debt, some visible to regulators and some not. Economic growth in such contexts become overly reliant on rising asset prices to offset leverage, exacerbating inequality and asset market consolidations that may overly influence public policies, particularly regulatory ones. As India strives to align its financial system with its economic aspirations for 2047, she should strive to maintain the fine balance between financial sector development and the growth on one hand and financialization of other. It means the country has to chart its path with respect to its context, considering the levels of financial savings in households, its investment needs, and the levels of financial literacy. Ensuring that incentives in the sector are consistent with national growth aspirations is a policy imperative. One critical risk to guard is the dominance of financial markets in shaping policy and macroeconomic outcomes, phenomena known as financialization. The consequences of financialization are evident, which has led to unprecedented levels of public and private sector debt, some visible to regulators and some not. External sector getting FDI right. India's external sector contributed to continued to display resilience amidst global headwinds of economic and trade policy uncertainties. Total exports, merchandise, and services have registered a steady growth in the first 9 months of FY25, reaching to $602 billion, 6%. $602 billion. Growth in services and goods and exports, excluding petroleum, gems, and jewelry, was 10.4%. Total imports during the same period reached $682 billion, registering a growth of 6.9%. On the back of steady domestic demand, the evolving global trade dynamics, marked by gradual shifts towards greater protectionism, require assessing the market situation and developing a forward-looking trade roadmap. By adapting to these trends and leveraging its strengths, India can accelerate its growth and enhance its presence in the global trade to strengthen its competitiveness and further integrate into global supply chains. The country can focus on reducing trade related costs and enhancing export facilitation to create a more vibrant export sector. This proactive approach will help India continue to thrive in an ever changing global market. On the capital front, foreign portfolio investments have shown a mixed trend in FY25 so far. Uncertainty in the global markets and profit taking by foreign portfolio investors led to capital outflows. However, strong macroeconomic fundamentals, favorable business environment, and high economic growth have kept FPI outflows positive overall. Gross foreign direct investment inflows have shown signs of revival in the first 8 months of the FY25, though net FDI inflows declined relative to April-November 23 due to rise in repatriation disinvestment. India's foreign exchange reserves stood at $640 billion at the end of December 24, sufficient to cover approximately 90% of our country's external debt of $711 billion as of September 24, reflecting a strong buffer against external vulnerabilities. India's external sector has performed well amidst unfavorable geopolitical conditions. On the current account front, though merchandise exports have displayed moderate growth, owing to a slowdown in external demand, merchandise imports have shown remarkable growth supported by strong domestic demand. Increased net services receipts and growing remittances have cushioned the rise in merchandise trade deficit. On the capital front, economy has been witnesses net positive capital inflows. Global FDI inflows have shown higher growth in the first 8 months of FY25 compared to a corresponding period of the previous year. However, a surge in repatriation has reined in the expansion of in the net FDI. FPI inflows have shown volatility in the first 9 months, showing mixed trends. Global trade dynamics have changed significantly, shifting from globalization to rising trade protectionism, accompanied by increasing uncertainty. This calls for a strategic trade roadmap for India to remain competitive and enhance its participation in global supply chains. India must continue reducing trade costs and improve facilitation to boost export competitiveness. Much remains to be done to enhance trade competitiveness. The good news is that doing so is entirely in our hands. On its part, the industry must continue to invest in quality. If the state produces governance and the private sector produces goods and services. If both actors focus on quality and efficiency, then despite the trade tensions and protectionism that are likely to come in the way of expanding global trade, India can increase in share in overseas markets and generate resources to sustain higher level of capital formation. Then it will be possible for us not just to dream of but actually realize higher economic growth rates on a sustained basis. Prices and inflation, understanding the dynamics in gauging the health of the global economy, understanding the trends in inflation is essential. While global inflation peaked in 22 due to supply chain disruptions and geopolitical tensions, it has declined since then, aided by policy measures. In India, retail inflation eased in 25 due to timely interventions by the government and RBI. Core inflation reached its lowest point in the decade, while food inflation was affected by supply side disruptions and adverse weather conditions. Onion and tomato prices are affected by decline in production. Onion and tomato prices are affected by decline in production, particularly due to extreme weather conditions and monsoon-induced supply chain disruptions. On pulses, despite being a major producer, India faces a gap in demand and supply. Government has undertaken several measures to rein in the prices of vegetables like onion and potato, which include procurement and buffer stocking of onion under price stabilization fund and subsidized sale of onion and tomato. Also, many administrative measures have been taken up to address the price pressures in pulses such as subsidized retail sale, stock limits and easing imports. Estimates suggest that retail price inflation will align progressively with the target. Global commodity prices are expected to decline, potentially easing core and food inflation. Long-term price stability could be achieved by robust data systems for monitoring prices, developing climate-resilient crops, and reducing crop damage and post-harvest losses. The RBI and IMF have projected that India's consumer price inflation will progressively align towards the inflation target in FY26. In the December 24 RBI's Monetary Policy Committee report, revised its inflation projection from 4.5% to 4.8% in FY25. Assuming a normal monsoon and no further external or policy shocks, RBI expects headline inflation to be 4.2% in FY26. IMF has projected an inflation rate of 4.4% in FY25 and 4.1% in FY26 for India. As per the World Bank's Commodity Markets Outlook, October 24 commodity prices are expected to decrease by 5% in 25 and 1.7% in 26. The projected declines are led by oil prices but tempered by price increase for natural gas and stable outlook for metals and agricultural raw materials. Among precious metals and gold prices are expected to decrease while silver prices are expected to increase. Prices for metals and minerals are expected to decline primarily due to increase in iron ore and zinc prices in general. The downward trend toward movement in the prices of commodities imported by India is a positive for domestic inflation outlook. A normal southwest monsoon in 24 has improved the water levels in reservoirs, ensuring sufficient water for irrigation during the Rabi crop production. As per the first advanced estimates of the agricultural production, Kharif food grain production is expected to increase by 5.7%. Production of rice and tur, the most important Kharif food grains, is expected to increase by 5.9% and 5.7% and 2.5% respectively. This could lead to softening of food inflation pressures over the course of year. However, rising international vegetable oil prices may pose upside risks to food inflation. government has focused on controlling food inflation through various supply side measures, which include strengthening the buffer stock of essential food items and periodic open market releases, subsidized retail sale of essential food items in specified outlets, easing imports of the essential food items through rationalization of duties, preventing the hoarding through imposition revision, and monitoring of stock limits. The budget 24-25 has envisaged measures like large-scale clusters of vegetable production, promotion of farmer producer organizations, cooperatives and startups for vegetable supply chains, and measures for achieving self-sufficiency in pulses and oilseeds. India faces a persistent deficit in the production of pulses and oilseeds, along with frequent fluctuations in tomato and onion production, leading to price pressures. To address this, focused research is needed to develop climate resilient crop varieties, enhancing yield and crop damage. Efforts to expand the area under pulses in rice fallow regions are likely to help. Promoting extension activities is crucial. Farmers should receive training on best practices, the use of high yield and disease resistant seed varieties, targeted interventions to improve agricultural practices in major growing regions for pulses, tomatoes, and onions. Implementing robust data collection and analysis systems to monitor prices, stocks, and storage for processing facilities is essential in various tiers of government. This data should be used to identify areas of improvement and make informed policy decisions. High frequency price monitoring data for essential food items collected by various agencies within the country may be linked to quantify, and monitor price buildup at each stage from the farm gate to the final consumer. Medium term outlook: deregulation drives growth. May we live in interesting times, the Chinese proverb, often understood as an indication of an impending turbulence, is pertinent. Worldwide, we see a backsliding of economic integration with geo-economic fragmentation replacing globalization. Economic realignments and readjustments are imminent. Rise of China as a manufacturing powerhouse and its impact on the manufacturing aspirations of other nations, as well as supply of minerals, materials, machinery, and equipment needed for energy transition pose challenges. Amidst, India is in the middle of a change that represents an unprecedented economic challenge and opportunity. This chapter examines the India story in this context. It suggests policy responses with special emphasis on the importance of domestic growth levers and shedding of regulatory compliance burden. Enhancing economic freedom for individuals and small businesses is arguably the most important policy priority to define and bolster India's medium term growth prospects. A renewed paradigm for medium term growth, complementing the efforts of center, states must pursue systematic deregulation as a policy priority so that economic freedom of factors of production is augmented. Factor market regulations, laws that affect the use of land, labor, and building are right place to begin. Since these regulations affect decision making in all enterprises, states can begin the deregulation exercise by identifying regulations that affect decision making in enterprises. Next, states can compare their regulations on these issues with those in other states and countries. Finally, after identifying alternatives, states must examine the economic impact of their current regulation on a single sample enterprise. States need not undertake a complex analysis of all economic effects. Instead, states may undertake a data informed exercise of mapping how much resources, time, and risk a single enterprise must devote to compliance. The call for enhancing economic freedom through deregulation has renewed momentum in today's rapidly evolving global economy. Over-regulation stifles innovation and economic dynamism. In many instances, regulations, while intended to protect consumers, workers, and the environment, can unintentionally create barriers to entry reduce competition and slow the pace of innovation. By reducing excessive regulatory burdens, government can help businesses become more efficient, reduce cost, and unlock new growth opportunities. Strategic and systemic deregulation can catalyze growth, innovation, and competitiveness. Systemic deregulation is as critical, if not more, as investments in infrastructure and incentives to encourage innovation and create viable Mittelstand, that is India's SME sector. The focus of Mittelstand has played a pivotal role in economic success of countries like Germany, Switzerland, Japan, and Singapore. These nations have leveraged strength of their Mittelstand to drive innovation, foster high quality manufacturing, and create robust export economy. With deregulation, India's Mittelstand can help the states weather economic shocks, enable India to realize its manufacturing aspirations, attract long term investments, and encourage growth. Such growth would be sustainable and employment sensitive, that is, enhancing workers' long term welfare. Even as large companies invariably tend to prioritize capital intensive growth over labor intensive growth, small and medium term enterprises are likely to have a better balance between the two, encouraging employment generation. That is a compelling reason to ensure that state does not hinder their growth. States have an opportunity to undertake regulatory reforms that fundamentally change the nature of interaction between government and small and medium businesses. State can encourage a facilitative and collaborative relationship by adopting regulations sensitive to businesses, economic capacity, and minimizing opportunity cost. Countries worldwide have instituted programs for sustained focus on deregulation. For example, the United States has created Office of Management and Budget. This office examines all proposed legislation in the federal government based on cost effectiveness. The incoming administration in the US has set a great store of deregulation by setting up a Department of Government Efficiency. In an op-ed in The Economist, the Argentinian president argued for economic prudence and reduced regulatory burdens. Similarly, the United Kingdom Parliament has adopted a better regulation framework. As part of this framework, Parliament enacts all new legislation in adherence to one in, two out principle, requiring every profound pound of the new regulatory burden on businesses to be offset by identifying and removing 2 pounds of existing burdens from other areas of the regulation. New Zealand has established a Ministry of Regulation to examine laws and propose repeals and amendments to improve compliance experience. Indian states must examine these global experiences and carry key lessons relevant to their context. The need to find growth avenues in an export challenged, environment challenged, energy challenged, and emission challenged world means we need to act on deregulation with a greater sense of urgency. The focus on domestic growth levers is not an option but a compulsion. Without deregulation, our policy initiatives will not deliver the desired goals. The right balance of deregulation and freedom can unleash the creative and productive capacities of small and medium entrepreneurs, leading to innovation, greater competition, and overall prosperity. By empowering small businesses, enhancing economic freedom, and ensuring a level playing field, governments can help create environment where growth innovation are not only possible but inevitable. India's growth aspirations require nothing less. The areas suggested for deregulation in this chapter are merely illustrative, but there are multiple benefits and likely unintended beneficial consequences once they are set in motion. Concerted actions by state towards deregulation will lift sentiment, enhance faith and trust in governance, and even improve compliance as the relationship between the governing and governed turns into a partnership. Second, once some regulations are repealed or simplified, the remaining ones will become progressively easier. It is like peeling an onion. Once one layer is removed, the other layers come into view and become easier to peel off. Third, it may set up butterfly effect referring to in a different context earlier in this chapter. Butterfly effect means that small actions can have large consequences. Small acts of deregulation may set off big waves of entrepreneurship, investment, innovation, and growth. Entrepreneurship, investment, innovation, and growth. Investment and infrastructure, keep it going. Building infrastructure, physical, digital, and social, have been a central focus area for the government in the last 5 years. This had this has had various dimensions: increase in public spending on infrastructure, creation of institutions to debottleneck approvals and execution, and innovative modes of resource mobilization. In FY25, capital expenditure has gathered momentum post-election. Government has recognized the importance of continuing the pace of infrastructure building and increasing need to promote sustainable construction practices. It is also clear that public capital alone cannot meet the demands of upgrading the country's infrastructure commensurate with the requirements of Viksit Bharat at 2047. We need to ensure increasing private participation in infrastructure by improving their capacity to conceptualize projects and their risk in confidence in risk and revenue sharing mechanisms, contract management, conflict resolution, and project closure. The efforts of union government would need to be supplemented with wholehearted acceptance of the need for public-private partnerships in infrastructure across the country. Equally important, the private sector must reciprocate to building infrastructure, physical, digital, and social, central focus area for the government. In the last 5 years, various dimensions: increase in public spending on infrastructure, creation of institutions to debottleneck approvals, and execution of innovative methods of resource mobilization. The government has recognized importance of continuing the pace of infrastructure building and increasing need to promote sustainable construction practices. Private capital alone cannot meet the demands of upgrading country's infrastructure. We need to ensure increasing private participation in infrastructure. मतलब पब्लिक कैपिटल अलोन cannot meet the demands. Private capital को कैसे? Private participation in infrastructure by improving their capacity to conceptualize projects, their confidence in risk and revenue sharing mechanism, contract management, conflict resolution, and project closure. The government has placed infrastructure development at the center stage of its fiscal and policy agenda. The capital expenditure of the Union government in FY25 has been budgeted at about 3.3 times the capex for FY20. In quarter 1 of financial year 25, the constraints on new approvals and spending during the general election, coupled with heavy monsoon in many regions, affected the progress of infrastructure spending. Between July and November, the pace of capex has picked up. The review in the chapter shows that progress of physical indicators in the current year mirrors the financial progress. Addition of the rolling stock of railways, port handling capacity, and power and transformation capacity improved during FY25 so far on a year-on-year basis. The addition of length of highways, roads, and railways has been modestly lower on the whole, seen against the background of the constraints that prevailed in quarter 1 of FY25. Infrastructure build-up in the current year has stayed on course. Apart from asset creation, our infrastructure program also emphasizes the use of sustainable materials and processes. These considerations are receiving particular attention in areas such as highway development, waterway projects, power capacity addition, and waste management. Given the global imperative of promoting sustainable practices, model practices in this direction need to be replicated widely. India needs a continued step up of infrastructure investment over the next 2 decades to sustain high rate of growth. Requirements are plenty. Accelerating our efforts to build integrated multimodal transport coupled with modernization of existing physical assets will improve efficiency and last mile connectivity, disaster resilient urbanization, public transport, preservation and upkeep of heritage sites, monuments and tourist destinations, as well as rural public infrastructure, including connectivity, call for greater attention. Our net zero commitments entail added stress on creating renewable energy capacities. Quite clearly, public sector efforts cannot fully meet these targets. There are binding budget constraints to different tiers of government. Private participation should accelerate in many critical sectors in many ways: program and project financing, project planning, financing, construction, maintenance, monetization, and impact assessment. Our infrastructure project program support a variety of PPP models like build, operate, transfer, toll and annuity, design, build, finance, operate and transfer, hybrid annuity model, and toll, operate, transfer. PPP models like build, operate, transfer, design, build, finance, operate and transfer, design, build, finance, operate and transfer, hybrid annuity model, and toll, operate, transfer. Build, operate, transfer, toll and annuity, design, build, finance, operate and transfer, hybrid annuity, and toll, operate, transfer. The government has instituted many debottlenecking and facilitatory mechanisms like the National Infrastructure Pipeline, National Monetization Pipeline, and PM Gati Shakti that have made progress. Financial market regulators have introduced reforms to encourage private participation. Yet the uptake of private enterprise is limited in many core sectors. The strategy to step up private participation needs coordinated action of all stakeholders involved: government at different tiers, financial market players, project management experts and planners, and the private sector. Capacities to conceptualize projects, develop sector-specific innovation strategies for execution, and develop high expertise areas in risk and revenue sharing, contract management, conflict resolution, and project closure need to improve substantially. The efforts of union government would need to be supplemented with wholehearted acceptance of the need for public-private partnerships in infrastructure across the country. Industry, all about business reforms. The global manufacturing landscape has undergone significant shifts over the past decade. India has one of the dynamic economies that gained strategic greater presence in the space gradually vacated by developed countries. A strategic emphasis on public capital formation and significant logistic improvements has underpinned this achievement. Lately, however, there have been serious challenges to global manufacturing in terms of persistent geopolitical tensions, aggressive industrial and trade policies, supply chain disruptions, and global trade slowdown. This has posed a challenge to export demand for India's manufactured products. Industries such as steel, cement, chemicals, and petrochemicals have stabilized industrial growth, while consumer focused sectors like automobiles, electronics, and pharmaceuticals have emerged as growth drivers. As we progress, fostering R&D investments, innovations, enhancing the growth, and formalization of small manufacturers will drive growth across various sectors. State level analysis indicates that business reforms in states are likely to foster industrial development. Achieving India's ambition of becoming a strong manufacturing power necessitates sustained and coordinated efforts from all tiers of government, private sector, skilling ecosystem, academia, and R&D institutions. Economic Survey 23-24, released in July 24, reported over the last decade output shares were realigned among industrial segments in favor of sectors like chemicals, wood products, furniture, pharmaceutical, automobile, steel and machinery and equipment. Import dependency in sectors like coal, capital goods and chemicals continues. Global uncertainties may constrain export demand and affect the domestic cost of production by influencing the prices of import intensive raw materials. The path to further industrialization is paved with deregulation, R&D, and innovation, and improving the skill levels of the workforce. Commitment to R&D must be in the DNA of the industry, independent of any fiscal incentive, since it is about global competitiveness and profitability. Sectors with widely scattered production units like textile and the MSME sector in general seek support systems to develop projects and ensure finance and easier compliance and grassroots level facilitation to ensure market access. The foregoing analysis supports and reinforces these conclusions and suggestions particularly strongly in the following respects. The first is the connection between the uncertain and unsupportive global environment and the Indian industry. There was a manufacturing growth deceleration in first half of FY25, a part of it was due to seasonal causes like the alignment of festivities and monsoon related disturbances, slackening global trade, and aggressive trade and industrial policies of many major economies have affected manufacturing and investment by the private sector. However, business surveys and purchasing manager index point to improving optimism. The way ahead lies in the vigorous focus on deregulation, R&D, appropriate skilling, and employment strategies, and targeted support for small enterprises. This will improve the competitiveness of Indian industry and prepare it to weather global challenges. The brief state-wise analysis presented in this chapter reveals that they are vastly different in their industrial strength, weakness, and accomplishment. It also highlighted that the state of business regulations and reforms varied across states, and these differences are closely related to their industrial progress or lack of it. This reiterates the need for appropriate business reforms at the grassroots level. Hence, as noted in the chapter, in a rather unsupported global environment, it calls for lasting synchronized efforts for all tiers of government, private sector, and skilling ecosystem, academia and R&D institutions, as well as financial stakeholders to enable India realize its ambition as a manufacturing powerhouse. Services, new challenges for the old warhorse. The services sector has been fueling growth both domestically and globally. In FY25 so far, services propped up GDP growth when manufacturing has been affected by dampening global merchandise trade. Critical role of service exports in strengthening India's external balance and increasing servicification of the industrial sector adds to the importance of Indian economy. Logistics services have regained their pre-pandemic momentum and are enhancing the user experience through digitization. India continues to be an important partner in the changing global technology landscape through an adoption of digital technologies in the business processes. Initiatives such as ONDC are making these transformations more inclusive, equipping the labor force with requisite skills and creating an enabling environment through simple and transparent processes of grassroots level governance will go a long way in realizing the full potential of commercial services and building resilience to global headwinds. In the Economic Survey 23-24, we reported two significant transformations are reshaping India's services landscape. The rapid technology driven transformation of the domestic service delivery and diversification of India's service exports. The technology-driven transformation of domestic service delivery, rapid technology-driven transformation of domestic service delivery, and diversification of India's service exports. At the helm of this change are financial and professional services. In the first half of FY25, about 45% of the total service sector GVA growth in India was due to financial, real estate, rental, and professional services, almost as much as they did during the last decade. Globally, services are presently showing up growth even in countries where there is a manufacturing slowdown inflected by moderation in merchandise trade buoyancy. This presents an upside of possibilities due to service exports and hence domestic services output. At the same time, new risks have surfaced in the growth of IT and professional services in view of recent changes in global policies following key electoral outcomes. Regulators have expressed concerns about potential impact of offshore work on the quality of audits. The general concerns expressed seem to stem from the breakdown of traditional apprenticeship model, inadequate direct supervision, language barriers, and inability to communicate instructions effectively in complex cases, information gaps of remote auditors, risks of loss of confidentiality, and differences in regulatory provisions in countries involved, resulting in compliance gaps. These perceived risks present a downside risk to export-led services growth. Domestically, the embedded service content of the non-service economic activities has increased significantly. As evidenced by the National Account Statistics, there is a growing literature emphasizing the servicification of manufacturing, that is, increasing utilization of services in manufacturing production and post production value addition. This means that growth in manufacturing has significant bearing on service sector growth and vice versa. At the same time, increasing penetration of digital technologies And artificial intelligence in manufacturing and service sector activities like finance, retail and commerce, telecom and transport logistics is changing the very composition of demand for embedded services. This picture of emerging services landscape auto generates two conclusions. Firstly, it is widely believed that manpower and sectors with suitable digital and technical skills stand to benefit from AI penetration. Hence, one of the primary conditions for manufacturing and service sector progress is the focus on appropriate skilling of the labor force. The significant initiatives need to be carried forward into action by synergetic efforts of all tiers of government, private sector, and skilling institutions. Second, there is an urgent need to review and amend complicated procedures at the grassroots level, regulations and rules that hinder both manufacturing and services. Chapter 5 offers several suggestions in this regard. This will help build resilience against the likely persistent global headwinds. Agriculture and food management sector of the future. India's agriculture sector has demonstrated remarkable resilience in the recent years, marked by consistent growth rates. This stability can be largely attributed to various government initiatives to enhance productivity, promote crop diversification and increase crop farmers' income. Enhance productivity, promote crop diversification and increase farmers' income. Enhance productivity, promote crop diversification and increase farmers' income, a crucial factor influencing agricultural performance in the impact of weather conditions. Climate variability can present several significant challenges. However, farmers with diverse income streams are better positioned to navigate these uncertainties. Allied activities such as animal husbandry, fisheries, or agroforestry can enable farmers to mitigate risk effectively. Various government initiatives are specifically designed to address these challenges. India's agricultural sector, despite encountering various challenges, remains a crucial pillar for economic growth and ensuring food security of the nation. This sector has consistently demonstrated remarkable resilience, evidenced by a stable growth rate supported by a range of government initiatives to enhance productivity, diversify crop portfolios, and provide essential social security support for farmers. The increasing significance of the allied sectors such as animal husbandry, dairying, and fishing underscores the importance of diversification in sector activities and sources of income to boost their income levels and building resilience. By tapping into these complementary sectors, farmers can create additional streams of revenue that can buffer them against the inherent volatility of traditional crop production. However, the sector is not without its challenges. Issues like climate change and water scarcity present significant obstacles that require focused and targeted interventions. Promoting agricultural production patterns and practices that align with specific agroclimatic conditions and natural resource availabilities of different regions across the country is vital. Investment in research and development, especially on climate resilient varieties, resistant varieties, improved agricultural practices, diversification to high yield and climate resilient crops, and micro irrigation can yield sustainable long term benefits. The widespread adoption of digital technologies in agriculture will unlock further possibilities for enhancing productivity. Improving price discovery and market efficiency is another critical aspect that necessitates price discovery and market efficiency is another critical aspect. Strengthening market infrastructure is essential to facilitate this improvement. This can be achieved by effectively utilizing the ENAM, a platform for farmers to access broader markets, further support the establishment and operational capabilities of FPOs, and enabling cooperatives to play a more active and influential role in agricultural markets is paramount to fostering an inclusive market environment. Government initiatives like PM Kisan, which provides direct income support to farmers, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Man Dhan Yojana, which offers pension schemes for farmers, have successfully contributed to bolstering farmers' income and enhancing their social security nets. More than 11 crore farmers have been benefited under PM Kisan, and 23.61 lakh farmers have enrolled under PMKMY, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Man Dhan Yojana, as of October 31, 2024. In addition to these efforts, reforms such as eKYC compliance under the UN ORC initiative, One Nation, One Ration Card initiatives, and credit guarantee schemes such as e-negotiable warehousing receipts financing address systemic inefficiencies that have historically plagued the agricultural sector. पहला प्रधानमंत्री किसान मान धन योजना which offers pension schemes for farmers, direct income support. More than 11 crore farmers have been benefited under PM Kisan and 23 lakh farmers have enrolled under Pradhan Mantri Kisan Man Dhan Yojana. Moreover, there is a concerted focus on modernizing food grain storage systems, particularly in remote and hilly areas, which reflect a strong commitment to improving the overall supply chain infrastructure. While various initiatives have helped in India's agriculture and allied services to grow under challenging circumstances, the good news is that there is still significant untapped growth potential. The right set of policies across all levels of government can reduce the overproduction of cereals and address the underproduction of pulses and edible oil. For instance, India's farmers must be allowed to receive price signals from the market unimpeded with separate mechanisms designed to take care of the cost of living impact on deserving households for specified durations. 2. They need to have market mechanism to hedge their prices. 3. They need the right policies that nudge them towards away from impairing the soil fertility with unbalanced application of fertilizers and from producing already overproduced crops will deplete India's water resources and use of electricity excessively. These policy shifts will help lift agricultural productivity in the economy by boosting labor and land and labor productivity in the sector. Consistent and stable growth of agriculture at around 5% with 20% of overall GVA in the economy will contribute 1% to growth to the GVA. Agriculture will then absorb surplus labor even as output per labor worker and output per hectare rise. Agro-based entrepreneurship will flourish even more than it already does. In the process, India will not only achieve food security for itself, but also enable it for other nations too. The possibilities are both exciting and limitless. Climate and environment adaptation matters. India needs to achieve robust economic growth to attain developed nation status by 2047 with a focus of inclusive and sustainable development. While the country has low per capita carbon emissions, it is committed to pursuing low carbon growth. However, it faces challenges in deploying renewable energy, particularly due to lack of storage technology and access to minerals. Given India's vulnerability to climate change, a strong adaptation strategy is essential. The increase in adaptation expenditures from 3.7% to 5.6% of GDP between FY16 and FY22 indicates the prominence adaptation and building resilience play in the development strategy. The Lifestyle for Environment initiative, LIFE initiative, designed to encourage sustainable practices and circular economy, will play a transformative role in the development process. The flow of international finance has remained grossly inadequate, with much of the action being financed from domestic resources. The outcomes from the recent COP29 has little promise on that account. India's climate efforts are anchored in its ambitious commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2070. This long term goal is entwined with the country's aspirations for high and stable economic growth, which envisions becoming a developed nation by 2047. Realizing this mission necessitates a delicate balance, achieving low carbon development while ensuring that critical imperatives such as affordable energy security, job creation, sustained economic expansion, and environmental sustainability are met. To effectively navigate this dual challenge, India is adopting a holistic approach that embeds mitigation and adaptation in growth strategy. Mitigation focuses on addressing the root causes of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, while adaptation seeks to minimize the adverse effects of climate change through a robust framework for resilience. Given the backdrop of decreasing global financial commitments to support climate action in developing countries, India must increasingly prioritize building resilience to safeguard the benefits of its rapid economic growth against climate induced setbacks. Adaptation and building resilience demand explicit and targeted policy measures, sufficient financing options, and seamless integration of adaptive strategies into existing policies and development programs. Adaptation seeks to minimize the adverse impacts of climate change through robust framework for resilience. Adaptation and building resilience demand explicit and targeted policy measures, sufficient financing options, seamless integration of adaptive strategies into the existing policies and developmental programs. It requires a multidimensional approach that encompasses a variety of initiatives, including the creation of appropriate policy incentives, the development of resilient infrastructure, research and development in climate related technologies, and mobilizing financial resources dedicated to adaptation initiatives. Additionally, it is essential that adaptation actions are tailored to be regional specific, considering India's vast and diverse geographic and agroclimatic landscape. Despite being one of the world's lowest greenhouse gas emitters per capita, India has made notable strides in reducing the emissions intensity of its energy consumption. Progress is largely due to increased deployment of renewable energy sources alongside a suite of energy conservation measures. Nonetheless, the growth of renewable energy faces substantial hurdles, particularly in energy storage technologies and sourcing of critical minerals necessary for this transition. While alternative solutions such as green hydrogen present a viable option for the medium term, affordability issues remains a significant barrier to widespread adoption. Furthermore, although nuclear energy could contribute to India's energy mix, its expansion is impeded by a lack of supportive ecosystem and monopolistic nature of nuclear fuel supply chains. Lessons learned from the experiences of developed economy underscore the risk of prematurely shutting down thermal energy sources without viable technological alternatives that ensure a stable energy supply. The challenges mentioned above in harnessing renewable energy at a scale indicate that India will need to continue the efforts to minimize the efficiency of its existing fossil fuel sources in the medium term. The advancement and deployment of low emission thermal power technologies, including advanced ultra supercritical power plants, will play a pivotal role in this transition. Investments in research and development related to battery storage technologies, as well as recycling, sustainable disposal of waste associated with renewable energy systems, are critical factors in ensuring reliable supply of energy from renewable energy sources and sustainability. The mission mode approach to developing carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology is essential for continued use and enhancement of thermal power plants in the medium term. In the agricultural sector, developing climate resilient seeds and improving agricultural practices, which may include the rejuvenation of water bodies, will be vital components in building resilience against climate impacts. The promotion of pro environment lifestyle changes, as envisaged under India's Life Mission, has significant potential to contribute to climate change mitigation by encouraging low carbon lifestyles and energy conservation behaviors. To transform Life's mission into widespread public movement, a comprehensive awareness campaign is crucial. This could include integrating the principles of Life mission into school and college curricula to foster environmental consciousness from a young age. Successful implementation of a Life initiative could provide India with a compelling evidence of achieving more sustainable outcomes with fewer resources. Accomplishing the goal of net zero emission by 2017 will require innovative strategies and robust implementation plans designed to confront both the challenges posed by climate change and the need for sustainable development to take center stage. To strengthen its renewable energy initiatives, India must prioritize investments in extensive grid infrastructure improvements and securing source of critical minerals necessary for this transformative shift. Social sector, extending reach and driving empowerment. India's economic growth strategy emphasizes inclusivity and welfare for all its citizens. The government's focus is on empowering citizens through education, healthcare, skill development, and social infrastructure development. All these aspects have seen significant progress. Further enhancements are still possible by improving delivery systems through innovation and technology. For example, achieving improved educational outcomes and healthcare access can be accomplished with innovative solutions such as integrating new teaching methods and preventing healthcare strategies. Peer learning, life skills, and social and emotional learning hold great potential for fostering lifelong learning. Additionally, prioritizing mental health in the workplace not only matters for overall well-being and harmonious society, but also enhance worker productivity. A strong focus on preventing non-communicable diseases combined with the use of technology can be economically effective, significantly reducing the cost burden on healthcare systems. The Indian economy's growth story emphasizes a welfare enhancement approach by the government, focusing on empowering all citizens and ensuring the efficient delivery of welfare measures. The government's initiative aims to provide opportunities for everyone, enabling them to achieve their professional and personal goals with focus on education, health, skilling, and innovation, and improved social and economic infrastructure. The aim is to achieve welfare for all. While the education and health system has made significant progress through various initiatives aimed at achieving national goals, there is a critical need to enhance delivery mechanisms. By rethinking and improving these systems and integrating innovation and technologies, one can ensure that benefits effectively reach the last mile and are fully realized by those who need the most. The importance of focusing on learning outcomes is underscored by reports revealing gap between class standards and actual learning levels. To address this gap and enhance learning outcomes, it is crucial to implement innovative teaching methods and strategies that prioritize peer learning, social and emotional development, digital literacy, and life skills. These approaches will not only boost academic performance but also foster cognitive and critical thinking skills among students. Policy making in India emphasizes preventive health to enhance life expectancy, quality of life, and economic growth through lower healthcare costs and improved productivity. The National Health Policy 2017 advocates universal health coverage, affordable care and prevention of NCDs, advancements in physical and digital health infrastructure, including e-Sanjeevani, UWIN, NHDM, drones, and AI, have improved healthcare access, particularly in underserved areas. Mental health initiatives and strategies to promote healthier lifestyles are crucial for addressing NCDs and boosting productivity. The government's focus on rural infrastructure, houses, and livelihoods reflect a comprehensive welfare for all approach by improving rural connectivity, sanitation, housing, access to drinking water, and social inclusion, alongside supporting microfinance, SHGs, and localization of SDGs. These initiatives ensure inclusive development. Together, they uplift rural communities, bridging gaps in equity and quality of life. Regulatory institutions in the areas of health and education must constantly balance the needs of the society that and that of the ease of provision of such services by the providers. Where the markets can do an effective job, regulations can either be withdrawn or compliance made voluntary with disclosure. Tight regulations increase the compliance and supervision burden on state capacity that is already stressed. This rise this gives rise to unfulfilled expectations on part of the public. Therefore, for India to receive the demographic dividend in full in the coming years, regulatory institutions need to evolve to focus on allowing outcomes to happen without being fixated on inputs. Trust based regulations backed up by transparency and disclosure on part of regulated deserves a chance. Regulators must develop their assessment parameters and report on their effectiveness transparently. There is no better way to demand right behavior than to set an example. Employment and skill development existential priorities. India's labor market indicators have experienced substantial improvement in the recent years, driven by robust post pandemic recovery and increased formalization. According to the periodic labor force survey, unemployment rate has significantly declined over time alongside positive trends in labor force participation and worker population ratio. Factory employment data further reflects the manufacturing sector's resilience. To fully capitalize on the demographic dividend, it is well recognized that creating Quality jobs that offer sustainable livelihoods is crucial. Creating quality jobs that offer sustainable livelihoods is crucial. Further, by prioritizing reskilling, upskilling, and new skilling, government is aiming to align workforce with global demands, enhancing both domestic and international employability. Simplifying compliances, promoting labor flexibility, and strengthening workers' welfare are vital for driving sustainable job growth. Lowering the fixed cost of doing business through deregulation will create room for enterprises to hire more. To boost women's workforce participation, prioritizing targeted skill development and providing entrepreneurial support is being pursued. Additionally, sectors like digital economy and renewable energy offer vast potential for creating high quality jobs, which is essential for achieving Viksit Bharat vision. In conclusion, India has seen a good growth in employment in the recent years, as highlighted by labor market indicators that show strong signs of post-pandemic recovery and increased formalization in the economy. This growth can be attributed to notable achievements in entrepreneurship, formalization, skill development, and the transformation of the regulatory framework. Labor laws intended to protect the rights of women workers have more often than not discouraged hiring by creating systemic barriers to their entry into workforce. India's new labor codes address this by enabling night shifts for women, while safety measures extending 26 weeks of maternity leave to gig and informal workers, mandating creche facilities in workplaces with 50 or more employees. Codes ensure equal pay and prohibit gender discrimination in recruitment, while allowing women to work in all sectors, including hazardous roles, with safeguards. These reforms will promote gender inclusivity and workplace safety and social security of women for women. By simplifying compliance, fostering labor flexibility, and promoting worker welfare, labor reforms have created an enabling environment that balances ease of doing business with the protection of worker rights. Together, these measures foster a virtuous cycle of job creation, supporting sustainable employment growth and economic inclusivity. Chapter 5 discusses in detail the important role of deregulation in economy. Deregulation in general, whether or not related to labor, will boost employment because it helps lower the cost of doing business and allows for the better resource to be used for expanding capacity through more labor and more better equipment. Labor in the AI era crisis or the catalyst. The rapid advancement of artificial intelligence presents both unprecedented opportunities and significant challenges for labor markets. In this context, as policymakers, it is important to pay attention to the evolving technological landscape and the potential impact it can have on the labor market. Historical parallels with earlier technological revolutions reveal critical role of inclusive institutions in managing disruption and ensuring equitable outcomes. Barriers to large-scale AI adoption persist in the present, which includes concerns over reliability, resource inefficiencies, and infrastructure deficiencies. These challenges, along with AI's experimental nature, create a window for policymakers to act. India's demographic advantage and diverse economic landscape position it uniquely to benefit from AI. However, achieving these benefits requires significant investments in education and workforce skilling. Supported by enabling, ensuring, and stewarding institutions, these mechanisms can help workers adapt to changing demands while providing essential safety nets. By fostering collaboration between policymakers, private sector, and academia, India can align AI driven innovation with societal goals. Ensuring inclusivity and sustainability in this transition is key to maximizing benefits while minimizing disruptions. With robust institutional frameworks and strategic planning, AI can serve not as a crisis but as a catalyst for equitable economic transformation, positioning India to thrive in an increasingly automated world. Concerns and fears about artificial intelligence disrupting labor markets have intensified as developments in the field have continually demonstrated rapid progress over the last 4 years. The increasing complexity of the models being developed today represent a paradigm shift in the field of AI, showing the world that in a few years, intelligent machines will be able to capable of performing tasks that are prominently handled by humans today. In 7 decades of since the development of artificial intelligence began, the progress made in the last decade lays down an important milestone for the domain. While impressive in its own right, AI still remains in the developmental stage and has a long way to go before it achieves the scope of adoption that have made technologies such as personal computer and internet ubiquitous. The scale of challenges left unaddressed are significant, and so is the time required by developers to come up with cost effective and resource efficient solutions. Therefore, as the essay suggested, estimates about the magnitude of labor market impact may be well above what might actually materialize. Nevertheless, complacency about low probability, high impact nature of the issue at hand could prove to be very costly for a country like India. As policymakers, it would benefit us to ask ourselves the question, what were the problems in the world that demanded AI as the answer? In other words, is AI a solution to in search of the problem? The question is not easily answered as innovation does not always respond to a problem, rather emerges as a product of human ingenuity. Thus, in some sense, AI represents human drive for improvement, for creating something previously thought impossible. However, when innovation has the possibility of coming at a great societal cost, the value of innovation must then be judged in the context of its potential loss generation. Despite the limitations of AI and the prerequisites necessary for its widespread application, it is worth taking notice of the fact that labor markets are shifting at present in anticipation of a distant future. Nobody knows how long these changes may last, but they can definitely leave a lasting impact on the physical and mental well being of those affected. The responsibility for course correction will then fall in the hands of the public sector. Therefore, from a policymaker's perspective, it may be costly to dismiss fears as exaggerated and adverse impacts as overestimated. Rather, they underscore the need for constant vigil and timely action. Learning from the lessons of the past, capacity building and institution building is the need of the hour for India to capitalize on the opportunity that lies ahead. Structural changes to how we educate our children will be required in addition to safety nets that can shield existing workers from economic and social fallouts. Additionally, regulatory frameworks will need to be revisited and amended to ensure that the use of AI aligns with societal values, balancing innovation with accountability and transparency. However, regulations will go only thus far. The corporate sector has to display high degree of social responsibility. Although the impact of AI on labor will be felt across the world, the problem is magnified for India given its size and its relatively low per capita income. If companies do not optimize the introduction of AI over a long horizon and do not handle it with sensitivity, the demand for policy intervention and demand on fiscal resources to compensate will be irresistible. The state in turn has to resort to taxation of profits generated from the replacement of labor with technology to mobilize those resources as IMF suggested in paper. It will leave everyone worse off and the country's growth potential will suffer as a result. Utilizing this window of time available during the nascent stages of AI to build robust institutions can ensure that we as a nation are well placed to minimize the cost as much as possible. This can help tilt the scale towards the benefits, bringing a balance to the cost benefit aspect in the labor driven services dependent economy like India. Labor driven services dependent economy like India, navigating this transformation necessitates coordinated participation from all agents of the economy. A tripartite compact between the government, private sector, and academia can ensure that gains from AI driven productivity are widely distributed, taking in the direction of inclusive growth strategy. Probability of success in this endeavor is directly proportional to the appreciation of the enormity of the challenge and gravity of the consequences of failure. So that's all for this one. See you in the next one.